Mafia 2 came out in 2010, with a remake launched a decade later in 2020. With it being a follow-up to one of my most recently completed games and also coming to PlayStation Plus shortly, I feel now is the perfect time to see how Mafia 2 has aged, and if it is still worth getting in 2023. I'll be reviewing the definitive edition of the game, going over the story, gameplay and other important elements to help you make a good decision. I hope you enjoy. Just so you're aware, this is spoiler free completely, so don't worry. I'm aware there's an influx of newer players coming since it's on PlayStation Plus, and I don't want to ruin anything for them. As a PSA to new users coming, you don't have to play Mafia 1 to play Mafia 2, they're not connected outside of a couple references. So let's go over the quality of Mafia 2's story, keeping it spoiler free. The quality to me was really good, if a little bit confusing at times. There's a lot of names thrown out early on in the story, and it really progresses quite fast. You explore a lot of areas, not just the main city, with seasonal changes too, which is really nice. The mission variety is mostly pretty good. Not too many missions are boring, and they all have pretty unique approaches going for them. I'd also say there's not too much filler, which is always nice to see when playing a story. The characters are all pretty good. I don't personally think we got to know as many characters as well as I wish we could have, but the quality doesn't dip at all when it comes to the lineup. And with how many characters there are, it keeps the game nice and fresh as you're playing through the story. The length of the game feels a bit longer than the first one. I managed to get through the game in around 20 to 25 hours, but as you'll see later in the video, that wasn't totally due to intentional design. That being said, the game told a long story over a decent amount of time, which is good, nothing felt overly rushed. One small thing I do have to mention though is I found the beginning of the story really slow starting. It takes a good while for things to get going, but when they do, it's really good, so if you're a newcomer, hold off on dropping the game too early. The only complaint I'd really have is that the first game goes for a serious approach, with humour only really reserved for witty one-liners and a couple goofy moments. It fully goes into the Mafia setting, whilst Mafia 2 tells a Mafia story with a bit of goofy humour at times. I like it, but watch this cutscene and you'll see what I mean.
Carlo's a real smart guy. He's into, astrology.
You mean astronomy?
F you, you f***.
Whilst being funny, it just doesn't really fit the Mafia style I was expecting after playing the first game. With this video, I'm realising I'm going to have to group some of these into sections so I can score them individually. It'll make sense towards the end why I have to do this, but as a whole, I'd give the story a solid 8.5 out of 10. It's good, really good. I do personally prefer the first game, however, I did think this was an incredible playthrough. So the gameplay, I have a decent amount to say, some good and some bad. So let's start with positives. The open world is awesome, so much improved over the first game. The sandbox is so much better with clearly marked buildings for players to mess around in. You can perform store robberies to make money, which is really cool and fun to do. You can purchase clothing, which is something you couldn't do in the first game. And the city actually feels it has so much of a purpose, not just a backdrop to the story. The weapon variety, by the way, is so much better. I can't state this enough. Multiple SMGs, rifles, shotguns, pistols, etc. Finally a decent variety of weapons, which was something I touched upon in my last video talking about Mafia 1. Driving also feels up to a much higher standard, which is nice. I think this is partially due to the map being a little bit wider in most areas, and maybe me just being used to the Mafia driving. But speaking of the map is awesome, nice and huge. Lots of variety, it's just straight great. Plenty of stores to mess around with as I said earlier, the NPCs have so much life to them. And most importantly, the setting is absolutely beautiful, as I'm sure you can all see. The combat, however, is where I begin to have some issues. To me, it was by far the most infuriating element of this game, which is unfortunate considering how much I enjoyed the first game's combat. The issue is less so how the guns handle, and more so how the camera handles and how quite frankly bullshit the game can be at times. Watch this clip and I think you'll kinda get what I mean. It's just quite frankly insane at times. It feels like I'm playing a Twitch shooter. By the way, I was playing on normal. Like, man, this game don't play no games. I really love the realistic element of when you get shot, you fucking die. But like, in all seriousness, this is a pretty intense combat loop. It's not something you can just casually outskill as well. It's genuinely at times just the look of the draw. You can cheese it if you do this weird sort of cover thing where your body's hidden but your crosshair isn't, but otherwise it's nothing short of hell. But to me, the biggest flaw actually comes with camera angles. A lot of the time, I was really frustrated when playing the game because the camera, it just felt like it was working against me. When it came to shooting, taking cover, or even fist fights, I was struggling the whole way. Now, these things don't ruin the game at all. but it just takes you out of the moment when you're in an intense fight or an intense moment in the story and you get one-shotted and have to go back to a checkpoint, which already, by the way, are pretty unforgiving in this game. It's just sad because, as I said, it really takes you out of the moment. It always just seems to be that when you're finally getting into the game, you'll get one-shotted or have some weird camera issue, and it just takes you out of the experience, and I really don't like that. Now look, I know this can simply be responded to with a get good, and maybe there's an element of that for sure, but I do feel there are some moments most players will be infuriated with due to unfair deaths. It's just not fun when this happens. However though, that is most of the bad stuff I have to say about the gameplay. The rest is pretty positive. The police system in the game is great, just like the first one. They have a wanted system where police will recognise criminals' vehicles and outfits, and it kind of makes you switch up your gameplay a little bit, which I quite like. I also like that the police in Mafia 2 aren't crazy unforgiving like most games, they're on a good solid level. They changed the controls for Mafia 1 around in Mafia 2, and I don't hate it, some I prefer and some I wish were more similar to Mafia 1, but they trade blows so it's pretty meh overall, I don't mind it at all. I felt in Mafia 2 I had a bit more time to mess around in the city in comparison to the first game, which is good. In fact, there's times in the game where it just lets you go around and do whatever you want with no objective. And I quite liked how it let me progress however I wanted around the city in certain elements. You'll see that when you play the game, if you do. There's plenty of collectibles around the game, which is cool. Some even contain boobies, so that's a 10 out of 10 game right there. There's plenty of cool collectibles around the map though to collect, and most are mainly just artwork comics though, so I guess it's mainly for the more dedicated fans, but still, it's nice to have collectibles. Regardless, I felt the gameplay was pretty good for the most part, excluding a few issues I had with it. Sure, the combat was frustrating and the camera angles are excruciating at times, but the map is much improved with a bunch of seasonal changes as well. There's also just a lot more interiors in this map, which is always a good thing. Stores actually have a good reason to be used now. There's an actual reason to get involved with the sandbox in this game, which is just something I really wish we got in Mafia 1. So, aside from the jank, I'm going to give the gameplay a 9 out of 10. I thought it was good and it gives the player so much more to experience than the prior title. So our final category is actually the reason I had to split these scores. Let's talk about the definitive edition. I don't even know where to begin. All the prior stuff I spoke about this game was just Mafia 2. Why I like and dislike Mafia 2. It had nothing to do with the version I was playing. And oh my god, this port of the game is janky as hell. It's so infuriating. Let's begin with glitches, visual bugs, everywhere. This stuff isn't game breaking, but it's immersion breaking, and it just indicates a rushed and poor product to be honest. The occasional bug, sure, this many is inexcusable. The audio glitches out all the time. Half the time, Vito and Joe sound like they fell in a fishbowl with their audio. It's so bad, it's a shame. I don't even know if this is in the original, but asking around it doesn't seem to be. On top of that, the audio just randomly doubles up and says everything twice, overlapping each other, and that is so annoying when you're trying to get into the story. As a small positive, the graphics are nice enough. Not as good as the first game, but consider it's a remaster and not a remake, it's pretty alright. Some elements don't seem too improved from the original, but across the board, most of it looks better. But Jesus Christ, let's stop beating around the bush here. The game is broken. It's really broken. On chapter 14 in the game, I tried to go to a door and it wouldn't open. Then I had to restart over an hour of gameplay just to take a second attempt at the level, which thankfully worked. But the idea the game can break so much you can't progress through the story and you have to backtrack is unacceptable, honestly. And this right here kills the game for me. It breaks my heart because the game is good but the product is not. At the end of the day, I was able to enjoy and experience the game, but it came with a lot of issues. Too many issues, to be honest. As much as it pains me to say, I have to give this section a 4 out of 10, honestly. As a remaster, sure, it's okay, but the broken elements truly kill the game. I nearly quit twice when playing through the game, and if it wasn't for how good I felt Mafia 1 was, I honestly would have dropped it. All of this to say, the overall score rounds out to a 7.2 for the definitive version of the game, but would round out to a 9 out of 10 if we were actually just using a working version of Mafia 2. So where does this actually leave us? Well, this time it's not quite as easy as just giving you the score. I mean, I've given you some scores, but what do you do with that information? So I'm just going to have to kind of give you my personal recommendation. If Mafia 2 Definitive Edition is on sale, in the Trilogy Pack you can buy, or on PS Plus, play it, enjoy it, and love it. It's an awesome game despite its few issues, but if you're on Xbox or PC and you can access the old game, it's a fraction of the size, the price, is more polished, and doesn't even look bad. I'd just say go do that. But regardless of that, I do think Mafia 2 is worth playing. It doesn't matter which version you get, they're both good. I just feel it's plagued with so many issues, I'd feel dishonest for not warning you all. But that's it for this video. I want to say I do love Mafia 2. This series is genuinely shaping up to be a personal favourite for me. I'm absolutely loving these games and can't wait to play the third one. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all soon.